In the year 771 AH, a quiet revolution was underway in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. A man named al-Khwarizmi, with no titled lineage or wealth, was about to change the course of human knowledge forever. His tools were not swords or armies, but something far more potent: numbers. The Islamic world of the 9th century was a beacon of scholarship, a hub where knowledge from every corner of the known world, from the Greeks, the Persians, the Indians, and beyond, converged and flourished. But there was a problem. The methods of calculating and recording quantities were inconsistent, chaotic. Merchants, scholars, and astronomers struggled with cumbersome systems that varied from one region to another. What if there was a universal way to represent numbers, a system so logical and efficient that it could be understood by anyone, anywhere? Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian mathematician and astronomer, was tasked by the Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun with a mission that would define his legacy. The Caliph, a patron of science and knowledge, had established the House of Wisdom as a center of learning and innovation. He sought to bring order to the mathematical chaos of the time, and al-Khwarizmi was his chosen instrument. As Al-Tabari recorded in his Tarikh, al-Khwarizmi delved into the works of Indian scholars, studying their revolutionary concept of numbers. The Indians had a system based on 10 symbols, from 0 to 9, that allowed for an infinite range of calculations. It was elegant, efficient, and most importantly, universal. Al-Khwarizmi recognized its potential and set out to adapt it for the Islamic world. But integrating this system was not without its challenges. The traditional scholars of the time were resistant to change. The Greeks had their own numerical system, and many saw no need to adopt a foreign method. Al-Khwarizmi faced skepticism and even ridicule. How could a system that used an empty symbol for nothing zero be reliable? How could numbers written in a linear fashion be superior to the geometric symbols of the Greeks? Al-Khwarizmi persisted. He wrote a book, Kitab al-Jabr wa al-Nubala, which laid the foundations for algebra. In it, he described the Indian numerical system in detail, explaining its advantages and demonstrating its use in practical applications. He showed how it could simplify complex calculations, making them faster and more accurate. He presented it not as a foreign intrusion, but as a tool that could benefit the Ummah, aiding in trade, astronomy, and the administration of the vast Islamic empire. The turning point came when al-Khwarizmi presented his work to the Caliph. As Ibn al-Athir noted in al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, al-Ma'mun was impressed by the simplicity and power of the Indian system. He saw its potential to unify the diverse mathematical practices across his empire. With the Caliph's support, al-Khwarizmi's system began to gain acceptance. Scholars and merchants alike started to adopt it, drawn to its efficiency and universality. But the acceptance was not immediate. There were setbacks. Some scholars argued that the use of zero was a dangerous innovation, a deviation from the established traditions. Al-Khwarizmi faced moments of doubt, wondering if his efforts would be in vain. Yet he remained steadfast, relying on his faith and his conviction in the value of his work. As Ibn Kathir recorded in al-Bidaya wa al-Nihaya, al-Khwarizmi's perseverance paid off. His system, now known as the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, spread throughout the Islamic world and beyond. It became the standard for mathematical notation, revolutionizing the way numbers were understood and used. The impact of his work was profound, laying the groundwork for the scientific and technological advancements that would follow. 4,000 Muslim warriors stood before the mighty city of Isfahan, a fortress of the Persian Empire with walls said to have been built by giants. The year was 750 AD, and the Muslim army, led by the brilliant strategist al-Khwarizmi, faced a critical decision. Behind those walls, tens of thousands of Persian defenders awaited, ready to defend their heartland. The fate of the Muslim conquest of Persia hung in the balance. As Ibn al-Athir recorded in his al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, the Muslim forces were vastly outnumbered, but their resolve was unshaken. The stakes were overwhelming. If Isfahan fell, the path to the heart of Persia would be open, securing the Muslim hold on the region. But failure meant a humiliating retreat, emboldening the Persians and threatening the stability of the Muslim caliphate. The city of Isfahan was not just a military stronghold, it was a symbol of Persian resistance. Its fall would send a message across the empire that Muslim rule was inevitable. Al-Khwarizmi, known for his genius in both mathematics and military strategy, understood the gravity of the situation. He had studied the terrain meticulously, noting the city's high walls and the surrounding plains. The Persian army, according to al-Tabari's Tarikh al-Rusul wa al-Muluk, numbered around 20,000 well-trained soldiers fortified within the city's defenses. The Muslim forces, though fewer in number, were battle-hardened and fiercely devoted to their cause. The strategic challenge was clear: how to breach the seemingly impregnable walls of Isfahan without suffering catastrophic losses. Al-Khwarizmi's solution was as brilliant as it was unconventional. He ordered his men to dig tunnels beneath the city walls, a tactic that would later become legendary in military history. The tunnels, carefully excavated under the cover of darkness, would allow the Muslim warriors to emerge within the city, catching the Persians off guard. But the plan was not without its risks. The Persians had their own spies and informants, and the slightest misstep could alert them to the Muslim strategy. According to Al-Tabari, Khalid paused. The scouts reported increased activity within the city, hinting that the Persians might have discovered their plan. Doubt crept into the minds of some of the soldiers, who wondered if they were walking into a trap. Al-Khwarizmi, however, remained steadfast in his conviction. He had spent countless nights praying for guidance and consulting with his most trusted advisors. His faith in Allah's support was unshaken, and he knew that divine favor would guide their actions. As Ibn Khaldun noted in al-Muqaddimah, the true measure of a leader is not just in their strategic brilliance, but in their unwavering trust in Allah during the most trying times. The tunnels were completed, and the Muslim warriors prepared for their assault. Under the cover of darkness, they emerged within the city, taking the Persian defenders by complete surprise. Chaos erupted as the Muslim forces quickly gained the upper hand, their disciplined ranks and superior tactics overwhelming the confused Persian soldiers. The strategic payoff was immediate. The city's defenses crumbled, and Isfahan fell to the Muslim army. But the victory was not without its costs. The Persian forces, though defeated, were not entirely broken. Reports began to surface of reinforcements marching toward Isfahan, eager to avenge their fallen comrades. The Muslim victory was significant, but the war was far from over. The city of Isfahan had been secured, but the broader struggle for Persia's heartland loomed large. As the dust settled, the Muslim army took stock of their situation. The fall of Isfahan was a monumental achievement, but it was only one battle in a much larger war. The Persian Empire, though weakened, was not yet ready to surrender. The Muslim forces would need to remain vigilant, their resolve unwavering in the face of the challenges ahead. But the letter that arrived that night would change everything. It bore news of a new Persian army, larger and more determined than any they had faced before. The reinforcements were already on the move, their sights set on reclaiming Isfahan and pushing the Muslim forces back. The stakes had never been higher, and the Muslim army would need to draw on every ounce of their courage and faith to face the trials that lay ahead. In the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates cradled the cradle of civilization, a new threat emerged. The year of the Hijri was 232, 846 CE, and the Zanj, enslaved Africans brought to Iraq to work in the salt marshes, rose in rebellion. Their leader, Ali ibn Muhammad, a self-proclaimed Mahdi, commanded an army of 50,000, a terrifying force that threatened the very stability of the caliphate. The stakes were monumental. Baghdad, the jewel of Islam, lay vulnerable. The Caliph, al-Mutawakkil, needed a strategic mind to counter this menace. The call went out, and among those who answered was a man whose name would echo through the annals of Islamic history, Yaqub ibn Layth al-Safar. Al-Safar, a coppersmith by trade, had proven himself a capable leader and a brilliant tactician in the eastern provinces. His rise from obscurity to prominence was a testament to his character and his unwavering faith. As Ibn al-Athir recorded in al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, al-Safar was known for his justice, his humility, and his deep commitment to the principles of Islam. He was a man who sought to serve Allah through service to the Ummah. The strategic challenge was immense. The Zanj had taken control of the southern marshes, creating a formidable stronghold. Their numbers were vast, and their determination unyielding. Al-Safar, however, was not deterred. He understood that the key to victory lay in cutting off the Zanj supply lines and isolating them from their support base. With 20,000 men, a fraction of the Zanj's forces, al-Safar marched south. His strategy was clear. He would engage the Zanj in open battle, forcing them to confront his disciplined and motivated troops. The battlefield was set near the city of Basra, where the flat, open terrain favored his cavalry and archers. According to al-Tabari in his Tarikh al-Rusul al-Muluk, al-Safar's tactics were a masterclass in military strategy. He positioned his forces to exploit the Zanj's lack of cohesion, using hit-and-run attacks to wear them down. The Zanj, though numerous, were poorly trained and lacked the discipline of al-Safar's men. The battle raged for days, with al-Safar's forces gradually gaining the upper hand. Yet, even the most skilled commander faces moments of doubt. As Ibn Kathir noted in al-Bidaya al-Nihaya, al-Safar paused before the final assault. Scouts reported that the Zanj were preparing a desperate counterattack, their numbers swelling with new recruits. The weight of the decision was heavy. Would his forces hold, or would the tide turn against them? Al-Safar turned to prayer, seeking guidance from Allah. His faith was unwavering, and his resolve unshaken. He reminded his men of their purpose to uphold justice and defend the Ummah. With renewed determination, they pressed forward. The resolution came with the dawn. Al-Safar's forces launched a coordinated assault, breaking the Zanj lines and forcing a retreat. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Zanj, though defeated, were not destroyed. They would regroup, and the threat would linger. As the sun set on the battlefield, a messenger arrived from Baghdad. The Caliph had sent a letter, acknowledging al-Safar's victories, but warning of a new danger. In the distant lands of Persia, a new power was rising, one that sought to challenge the authority of the Caliphate. The letter was clear. Al-Safar's services were needed once more. With 40,000 Byzantine soldiers marching toward the city of Marash, the Muslim general al-Khwarizmi faced an impossible choice: defend the city with his mere 5,000 men, or risk everything on a desperate gambit. The fate of Khorasan hung in the balance. The Byzantines had regrouped after their defeat at Isfahan, and their emperor Leo, the Isaurian, sought vengeance. Al-Khwarizmi had been tasked by Governor al-Safar to hold the frontier at all costs. The land between the Euphrates and the Taurus Mountains was vast, but the key to halting the Byzantine advance lay at Ain al-Warda, a strategic pass that controlled access to the heart of the Muslim-held region. Al-Khwarizmi's mission was clear: halt the Byzantine advance or see Khorasan overrun. The stakes were catastrophic. If the Byzantines broke through, they would sweep into the fertile lands beyond, threatening the very stability of the caliphate. The governor of Khorasan, al-Safar, had entrusted Al-Khwarizmi with this critical defense, knowing the seasoned commander's ability to turn the tide against overwhelming odds. Al-Khwarizmi carefully surveyed the terrain. Ain al-Warda was a narrow pass, flanked by steep cliffs and dense forests. It was the perfect place for a smaller force to counter a much larger one. He ordered his men to fortify the pass, setting up defensive positions that would force the Byzantines to attack in a narrow front. The Muslims would strike from the heights, raining arrows and stones down upon the enemy. As Ibn al-Athir recorded in his al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, Al-Khwarizmi's strategy was designed to nullify the Byzantine numerical advantage, forcing them to fight on ground where numbers meant little. But the Byzantines were not idle. Their scouts had spotted the Muslim positions, and Emperor Leo dispatched a force of 10,000 cavalry to outflank the Muslims. Al-Khwarizmi's spies reported this movement, and the general knew he had to act quickly. He divided his forces, sending a detachment under his trusted lieutenant, Abu Ubaidah, to intercept the Byzantine cavalry. The rest of the army would hold the pass, waiting for the enemy to commit to battle. According to al-Tabari's Tarikh, al-Rusul wa al-Muluk, the Byzantine army arrived at Ain al-Warda in full force. Their infantry, clad in iron armor, marched proudly, confident in their superiority. The Muslim archers loosed their arrows from the cliffs above, but the Byzantines pressed forward, their disciplined formations holding firm. The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain the upper hand. Then disaster struck. The Byzantine cavalry, which Abu Ubaidah had been sent to stop, broke through the Muslim lines. Panic threatened to seize Al-Khwarizmi's forces as the enemy horsemen began to cut down the Muslim archers from behind. Al-Khwarizmi himself rode into the fray, rallying his troops and urging them to hold fast. He ordered his remaining cavalry to charge the Byzantine horsemen, buying precious time for the archers to regroup. The Muslims fought with desperate ferocity, their faith in Allah giving them strength. As Ibn Kathir notes in al-Bidaya wa al-Nihaya, Al-Khwarizmi's leadership turned the tide, inspiring his men to fight with renewed vigor. The turning point came when Abu Ubaidah's forces returned, having successfully defeated the Byzantine cavalry. They struck the enemy from the rear, encircling the Byzantine army. Trapped between the Muslim cavalry and the archers on the cliffs, the Byzantines began to falter. Their commanders were slain, and their formations broke apart. The Muslims pressed their advantage, driving the Byzantines back until they fled the field in disarray. The Battle of Ain al-Warda was a decisive victory for the Muslims. According to Ibn al-Athir, the Byzantines lost over 50,000 men, while Muslim casualties were comparatively light. The pass was secured, and the Byzantine threat to Khorasan was thwarted. Al-Khwarizmi's tactical brilliance and unwavering faith had saved the day, once again proving his worth as a commander of the highest caliber. But as the Muslims celebrated their victory, reports reached Al-Khwarizmi of another Byzantine force gathering to the north. The war was far from over, and the future of the frontier remained uncertain. In the year 823, with the Byzantine Empire massing 100,000 soldiers along the eastern frontier, one man stood between the Ummah and catastrophe. In Baghdad, the Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun received dire reports. The Byzantines, emboldened by their recent victory at Ain al-Warda, were preparing a monumental assault on the Islamic heartlands. The stakes could not be higher. If the Byzantines succeeded, the entire region from Antioch to Al-Andalus would be at risk. The Caliph turned to a man whose brilliance had already reshaped the world, a man whose mind was as formidable as any army. He summoned Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, the scholar whose name would one day echo through history. Al-Khwarizmi was not a soldier, but his intellect had already proven invaluable in the field. His mastery of arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy had given Muslim armies an edge in strategy and logistics. Now the Caliph tasked him with a mission of unprecedented importance: to maintain the balance of power against the Byzantine juggernaut. Al-Khwarizmi accepted the challenge. He was an astronomer, a mathematician, and a thinker, but in this moment he would become a strategist. The Byzantine Emperor Nicephorus had assembled a force of 100,000 men, a number that dwarfed the 40,000 troops the Muslims could field in response. The sheer scale of the threat was overwhelming. The Byzantines sought to exploit their numerical superiority, concentrating their forces near the strategic city of Melitene, a gateway to the Muslim world. Al-Khwarizmi knew that meeting them head-on would be suicide. His solution was not one of brute force, but of cunning and calculation. Drawing upon his knowledge of the terrain, he devised a plan to split the Byzantine army, forcing them to fight on two fronts rather than one. The Byzantines had amassed their forces in the open plains, where their superior numbers could be fully deployed. Al-Khwarizmi, however, knew that the key to victory lay in denying them the opportunity to use their strength. He ordered his troops to abandon the open field and instead take up positions in the rugged, forested hills surrounding Melitene. The Byzantines, confident in their numbers, initially dismissed this as a sign of weakness. But Al-Khwarizmi's strategy was far more sophisticated. By drawing the Byzantines into the hills, he forced them to split their forces, sending detachments to engage the Muslim troops in fragmented skirmishes rather than a single, decisive battle. The Byzantine commanders, frustrated by the Muslim avoidance of open combat, became increasingly aggressive in their pursuit. They divided their army into smaller, more vulnerable units, each seeking to flush out the elusive Muslim forces. Al-Tabari reports that the Byzantines, underestimating the Muslim discipline and cohesion, soon found themselves stretched thin. Their supply lines, which had been designed to support a concentrated army, grew brittle and disjointed. Meanwhile, Al-Khwarizmi's forces, familiar with the terrain, moved with precision, striking at isolated Byzantine units and disengaging before the enemy could rally. The Byzantines, now fighting on unfamiliar ground and without their full strength, began to suffer heavy losses. Their morale, once unshakable, began to waver. The Muslims, though outnumbered, were fighting on their terms. Al-Khwarizmi's tactical brilliance was paying off. The Byzantine commanders, realizing their mistake, attempted to regroup their forces. But it was too late. The Muslim forces, now emboldened by their successes, began to launch coordinated assaults against the scattered Byzantine units. The Byzantines, unable to concentrate their strength, were forced into a series of desperate retreats. The battle for Melitene had become a Muslim victory. As the dust settled, the Byzantines withdrew, their once mighty army now fragmented and demoralized. The Muslim forces, though fewer in number, had demonstrated the power of strategy over sheer force. Al-Khwarizmi's genius had saved the Ummah from catastrophe. But even as the Caliph celebrated this victory, whispers of a new threat began to stir in the West. The Byzantine retreat was not the end, but only the beginning of another chapter in the eternal struggle for power. The letter that arrived that night would change everything. In the year 756 AD, the Umayyad Caliphate faced a turning point that would alter the course of Islamic history. With only 3,000 loyal troops under his command, the Abbasid general Abu al-Abbas al-Saffar stood against the remnants of the Umayyad forces in Cordoba, a city that had been the heart of Umayyad power in Al-Andalus. The stakes were clear. The fall of Cordoba would signal the end of Umayyad rule in the west and the rise of a new era under the Abbasids. As Al-Tabari recorded in his Tarikh al-Rusul wa al-Muluk, the Umayyad prince, Yusuf al-Fihri, had gathered a force of 10,000 men to defend Cordoba. The city was a fortress, its walls strong and its people fiercely loyal to the Umayyad cause. For al-Saffar, the challenge was immense. He knew that a direct assault would be costly and might not guarantee victory. Instead, he chose a strategy of deception and division, a tactic that would exploit the political fractures within the Umayyad ranks. Al-Saffar sent messengers to key Umayyad commanders, promising them high ranks and governorships if they switched their allegiance to the Abbasids. Ibn al-Athir notes that many of these commanders, weary of the Umayyads' oppressive rule, were swayed by al-Saffar's offers. As the days passed, the Umayyad defenses began to crumble from within. According to Al-Tabari, al-Saffar's spies reported that several key gates of Cordoba were left unguarded during the night, a sign that the city's loyalty was wavering. However, the crisis was not over. Yusuf al-Fihri, sensing the impending betrayal, rallied his most loyal supporters and prepared for a last stand. Al-Saffar's forces, though smaller in number, were battle-hardened and highly disciplined. The Abbasid general knew that the fate of the caliphate hinged on this battle. He ordered his men to launch a surprise attack under the cover of darkness, aiming to breach the city's defenses before dawn. As the first light of day broke over Cordoba, the Abbasid forces had already breached the city's walls. The Umayyad defenders, caught off guard, were unable to mount a coherent resistance. Ibn al-Athir recorded that Yusuf al-Fihri was captured and later executed, marking the end of Umayyad rule in Al-Andalus. The city of Cordoba, once the jewel of the Umayyad Caliphate, now fell under the control of the Abbasids. But the victory was not without its costs. Al-Saffar faced a moment of doubt, as reports came in of pockets of resistance still holding out in the surrounding regions. The people of Al-Andalus, though weary of Umayyad rule, were not yet ready to fully embrace the Abbasids. Al-Saffar knew that the real challenge lay not in capturing Cordoba, but in winning the hearts and minds of its people. To secure his victory, Al-Saffar adopted a policy of reconciliation. He pardoned many of the Umayyad officials who had surrendered and integrated them into his administration. This tactic, as Ibn Khaldun later observed, was crucial in preventing further unrest and ensuring a smooth transition of power. The people of Cordoba, seeing the new ruler's fairness and justice, began to accept the Abbasid rule. Yet the story did not end there. As al-Saffar consolidated his power, news reached him of a new threat emerging in the east. The Byzantine Empire, sensing the weakness of the Abbasid Caliphate after the fall of Cordoba, began to mobilize its forces along the eastern frontier. The letter that arrived that night would change everything, for it spoke of a Byzantine army marching toward the heart of the caliphate, ready to exploit the chaos and reclaim lost territories.